Welcome to People More Interesting Than Me, the podcast, where I step back and let fascinating individuals take the spotlight. Join me as I sit down with incredible guests who captivate and inspire, showcasing their stories, experiences, and wisdom that make them truly extraordinary. Tune in for engaging conversations that'll leave you enlightened and entertained. At least I'm entertained. Today, I'm honored to have a distinguished guest with us, Dr. Hannah Lapp. Dr. Lapp is a trailblazer in the fields of neuroendocrinology, physiology, and behavioral sciences. At the heart of Dr. Lapp's work is a profound exploration into how early life environmental exposures shape the intricate dance of dyadic interactions between mothers and infants. Throughout her expertise, she seeks to unravel the mysteries of these interactions as a key mechanism for understanding neurobiological and health trajectories. Stay tuned and enjoy. So you're in Austin right now, started in Maryland, and then you went to Boston. What made you leave from Boston to Austin? Was it the research money?
Yeah, it was. So I graduated with my PhD, and then I got a postdoc working with someone at UT Austin.
I also have Dr. Hannah Lapp at the very top of this paper, just so you know. Like, I don't forget the doctor title. I'm going to highlight that. And I know, like, everyone is either lazy or they just don't want to get a real job. What was your reasoning? Like, what drove you to keep on getting your doctorate? Were you just fascinated?
Yeah, I just really enjoyed it. You mean through graduate school or to
Yeah, like
continue?
obviously a lot of people get their master's degree, not including
Yeah.
me. But like after that, it's like you really got, in my opinion, from what I've seen from people, you really got to push it. Like there's a master's degree, which is basically continued college. Getting your doctorate is like a whole different beast. It's like, at least from what I've seen with people, and you can disagree with that if you want.
So my graduate program did not have a master's step, so it was just straight in. So I don't have a master's. You just go straight on to a PhD. So it was a commitment from the beginning. But it does get very different. So the first 2 years are very similar to a master's program where you're taking classes and working in the lab. But then after that, you're mostly doing research. So it feels a little bit more like a job.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I guess it depends on what doctor you're getting as well. And I'm not talking about medical doctor or anything like that. I'm talking about like a mathematical like
Yeah.
PhD is much different from you're specifically, is it, what is it? I'm gonna butcher. It's either biology or no, just tell me.
My PhD is in developmental and brain sciences.
Okay. And
Yeah.
man, that's so specific. That's awesome. And that was specific to Austin when you went, right?
So finding a postdoc's a lot like, you have to find someone who has the research money to fund you, pay your salary. You have to find someone who research interests align with
That sounds very
what yours
difficult.
are. So and then you want to make sure you're moving into a position where you're going to learn new things. So it needs to align, but not too well. So you need to be probably bringing something new, some new skill to their lab, and then also be learning something new while you're in their lab.
And so does that usually entail like I was looking, like we were talking before, on your papers, and I guess in 2013 you were in your master's, so you at least had like 3 or 4 papers that you're co-authored on, right? Before you actually applied to that program. So that's what they kind of look for in what you're trying to say, right? Like something that you can add to the party.
Yeah, something I can add to the party. And then some papers that came out more in like 2019 were my dissertation work. So I talked about that, even though it wasn't published yet, to kind of, because publications are always delayed a few years behind the actual the work. So
What's the reasoning for that? Is it just like peer review, peer review, or a matter of like research money or like curtailing another, or is it peer review?
peer review is a big one. So mostly peer review. It depends on the study too. Like you might have some initial data from a project, but research moves so slow. So you could end like if you're doing an animal project, you could end the animal portion and then have some initial data right off the bat and be presenting that at conferences. And it could be a full another year before you have the rest of the data from that project because you're processing tissue and running stats and all
Oh
that.
yeah, because I guess do you do a lot of DNA work with you do? Okay. Quick question. The
Mhm.
mice. Like what does like mice and I feel like this is gonna sound so silly, but I can just imagine a bunch of researchers just talking for 3 hours on mice. Like this strain of mice I got this year was just like beautiful. You guys talk about like mice, like they're, I don't know, like the people in like farms going to the fair and like talking about their prize farm. That's what I see about like we got this one batch. Is it like that?
It is definitely like that. And then you have mouse people and rat people. A lot of the work I've done has been in rats. So I would call myself a rat person. Although
Okay, okay. And why would you this you'll probably your colleagues will ask you this. Why do you prefer rats over mice?
For what I study, mostly I think rats are a better model of maternal care because they generally show higher levels than
Okay.
mice do. I also rats are a lot smarter than mice. So if you walk in that housing room, mice are afraid no matter what. They'll
Mhm.
run from you and they'll get more aggressive because they're scared. Rats will learn like who you are and come up to the front of the cage and smell you. They're excited to see you. It's interesting.
That's funny.
Um, and they'll learn, like, if you do any sort of cognitive task, they'll learn it a lot
Okay.
faster.
One more stupid question. How has your perception of wild rats and mice changed? Has it?
A little bit. I think that they're probably a lot smarter and they have way more interesting life experiences than our lab rats and mice. But we actually had mice living in like a storage container in our backyard, like not that long ago, a few months ago. And I could not kill them. Like it's not a problem in the lab when there's like it's part of the experiment and planned and there's like that context and I've learned to kind of
Is it out of
uh,
fear or is it out of more like just being kind?
some of both, I think. I think that there's like I'm not in control of the situation like I am
Mhm.
in the lab. Like they're just gonna pop out of anywhere. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it feels completely different.
No, that makes sense. It's just funny how your perspective changes when you're like working at a job and doing something like that. Like your perspective of what mice used to be and what mice are now. So when I was reading your research and going through like some of the big things, like I had mentioned earlier, is maternal impact on offspring, environmental effects on maternal behavior, and early environmental impacts on offspring. Like two big things that popped into my mind was obviously nature versus nurture, and your favorite class in high school, Mr. Applestein, talking about
Mhm.
Harlow's classic study on the monkeys. How would you say, and if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's there's one control set where they're given I think it's a like a fuzzy monkey that's it's not locked. It's not given a bottle or anything like that. I forget what's the is it a bottle? And they drink more than they
Yeah, it's
would with
something.
the
Yeah.
basically saying that comfort is better for the development of an early rhesus monkey or something like that. How would you say, I guess, your research extends that kind of study? And obviously, you're not using monkeys because have you used monkeys before?
No.
No, not yet, you mean.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's definitely related. So a lot of some of what we try to model is attachment and some of the components of attachment theory. And that's really what Harlow kind of laid the base for. A lot of my research focuses on like sensory exchange of information between mothers and infants and parents. So like they could be vocalizations, but tactile stimulation is a big one. And so that it's like completely built off this idea that like comfort or tactile, like comfortable, the fuzzy blanket on the Harlow's monkey was more comforting and promoted attachment differently than the wire monkey that had food
Mhm.
associated with it. So it's how all of these cues kind of like feed into the development of attachment between parents and offspring. And we use rats, but I've also done some research with humans, tried to draw.
Ooh. What'd you do with that? What was the study like that with humans?
So I mean, I've helped out with some studies that have looked at these micro interactions. So there's someone at the University of Massachusetts and Ed Tronick, who has decades of work, and he was actually a student of Harry Harlow's. So
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
little family tree. And then right now I'm working with someone at Columbia University, who also, they use similar methods where they have these parent-infant face-to-face interactions, and they video record them. And it's only like a 5-minute or 2-minute interaction. And then they microcode different sensory cues of the mother and of the infant in like 1-second bins. So they're like, some poor research assistant somewhere is painstakingly like going second by second. Yeah.
That's a nose nuzzle. That's a 3. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they judge like facial like expression, like their affect based on their facial expression, vocalizations, where the infant is looking and the parent's looking, and then they look at basically how the infant's behavior affects the mother and how they respond, and that's sometimes called maternal sensitivity, and vice versa, how much the infant responds to the mother. So these scores and these statistics have the ability to predict different infant developmental outcomes. So attachment, function, things like that.
Yeah, when I was reading through the stuff, the new thing that kind of popped in my head was what you were just saying, caregivers/offspring like interplay. Like I never thought of it until like I had my own kids, and it's like, this is going to sound super cruel, but it's completely honest. Like I don't really see my kids as really my kids until they start interacting with me, like on a higher level. Like I see it as like a give and take. Like the first like couple of years of their life, you're taking care of them. You'll get a smile and a laugh, but when they start like saying your name and like mirror, like what is that called? Mirror neurons, where they mimic what you're doing and they slowly start picking up stuff that you do. That's when and tell me if this is what I guess you saw from your studies, but like I feel like the people selfish like me, and they didn't produce the child for 9 or 10 months technically. I feel like my wife has more in the game than I do because she's the one who really made the child, and I just helped out a teeny weeny bit. But I feel like when the child gives back selfishly, I feel like giving like all of it rather than when you're like up at 2 a.m. and
Yeah, I think our brains are wired to respond to, I mean, this is true of like adult social behavior, right? Just interacting, you're wired to respond to what the other person's doing. So when they respond, I'm sure it strengthens the relationship. And there are a lot of hormone changes that happen in both parents actually that facilitate kind of attuning to those infant cues.
How do you guys do that? Like, so instantaneously take like chemical surges, like dopamine. Do you take it like right after? I feel like that would be hard unless there's some way to like an IV line or something like that.
In humans or in
No, sorry, in rodents,
So dopamine's a tough one because it's not very stable. So you'd have to kind of measure it right away. And so, yeah, you can insert like little kind of collection tubes in certain brain regions. But you can also just often we collect and measure hormones in blood.
Okay.
That's kind of the easiest way to do it.
Okay, that makes sense. But you'd have to do it right after interactions or like high level interactions.
It depends on the hormone. So I've done the stress hormone, cortisol or corticosterone in rodents is probably the one I've measured the most often. And it increases in blood in about 3 minutes. In humans, we've collected a lot of saliva samples, and it doesn't show up in saliva until about 15 to 20 minutes after the stressor is experienced. So you have a bit more time. But yeah, you just have to time it.
Okay. because it's funny, like I don't know how to explain this, but you think about like a researcher and how they use like rats or mice. I didn't even think about that. That's one example, but you don't think about the in between, like, oh, they did this study, but like, how did they take the blood? How did they like get all these results? And it's funny, it's probably like a lot of like physical work to like do this and make sure, like something stupid to give an example. My son was watching Bob the Builder the other day, you know, that old show. And I'm like, they must have so much patience with doing claymation because they just have to stop like every 2 seconds that this character moves. And I'm like, it must just be like the worst. And it's just sometimes people don't know how much work is put into something. And then you look at the research paper, but you don't see like the long hours in the lab. You
Yeah.
don't see like how many times have you had to restart like a new set of rats or mice before? Like, has that ever been an issue where you're like, oh crap, I just like we got to restart?
Um, I don't think I've ever had like a catastrophic, this, we can't use anything. There's
Mhm.
definitely been a few studies where I've had to like pivot to kind of tell a different story than I originally set out to. And some of that's based off of the methods that we couldn't do that we thought we would be able to. And some of it is just related to the data we found. And, you know, there's this other story here. I don't think I've ever had to completely order a new set of mice or rats to to start
Do
a
you,
study, but often we do a pilot study. You'll do like a
okay.
mini version of the study, iron out some of the methods and make sure you can do it, and then hopefully plan your logistics well for the
do
larger
you,
study.
do you feel like that would be like a complete failure? Not a complete failure, but like such a story other people would repeat. Like, oh, did you hear about Lauren down the hall? Like, all our rats died. Like, she has to order new ones. She's got to ask a request to buy new rats. Like, that seems like
I'm
such a
sure that has
story.
happened. Yeah.
That would be a well, a pretty research funny story. Um, so can you kind of explain what the process is like overall researcher, like I guess I mentioned a little template. Is it kind of like you've got to write like a 30-page paper requesting like funding, requesting this amount of time, like this room, like equipment, stuff like that? What's that like?
It depends on where your funding is coming from. So sometimes there are startup funds, which are kind of funds that are given to faculty that they can use at their discretion when they're starting their own lab. So those are those are the most flexible. You can kind of do what you want, buy the equipment you need, run whatever. But yeah, if you don't have that, you apply for a grant and you have to put in a budget and you have to hope it gets funded. And it often takes many rounds. So a couple years of resubmitting, and some of it, I mean, there's so many good grant applications and not enough grant money. So it could take a while.
So what is it like if somebody doesn't like get any grant money? Are they just like slowly kicked out of the university? I guess if they're not doing like
And yeah, it depends if they have tenure.
okay.
If they have tenure, probably not. If they don't have tenure, then that is probably, depending on their institution, it might hurt their ability to get tenure. But that's also kind of like why you get startup funding when
Mhm.
you open a new lab. They don't want you to start from nothing.
Gotcha. No, that makes
So
sense.
yeah, and then if you get funding, then yeah, you start ordering the supplies you need. A lot of like the big pieces of equipment are, you can share them between labs, or the institution has them, or they're ordered kind of when the lab is set up. So it's usually not
Not a
large
lot of
pieces.
startup cost, or when I say that, I mean like the big equipment. Like I would imagine the rats share apartments or something like that, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
huge like rat cages and stuff like that. Um, no, that sounds like it would be, this is gonna sound stupid maybe, but like a good reality show, like you have a huge like research facility. I don't know. It sounds good to me. And there's just like people like competing for
There's a lot more DIY in research than I would
You
have
said
guessed.
DIY. You mean DIY?
Yeah, DIY. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, another thing before I forget, I want to talk about your I don't know how you phrase this, but Amber, basically what you were talking about, what they were doing with humans, you did with rats, right? From what I looked at on the diagrams and pictures, you were coding different points of the rat, and you're doing just that. I wouldn't say, you could say made your own algorithm where every time, I guess, a certain body part or came in contact with the infant and the caregiver, that was kind of like what you were talking about. Do you feel like that helps condense at least a lot of your studies where you can use your model? When I say Amber, by the way, people, this is, I don't know what the acronym stands for. She can tell after, but this isn't uh camera coding for you explain it. You're gonna do it even better than I can.
Yeah. So it uses, it's a pipeline and it's automates the scoring of home cage maternal behavior for rodents. So when you have a mom rat or mouse in the cage with a litter of pups, I do a lot of developmental research where we care about maternal behavior because it's the amount of maternal behavior is going to be a moderator for whatever effects we're looking at. So we want to quantify maternal behavior, but there's not a very easy way to do that. It's mostly manually scored, or people just go in and do it for very brief times during the day, just kind of scan the cages. And so that doesn't, you're missing a lot of information. So kind of the goal of the pipeline was to automate this process so you can give like really long videos and have really accurate measures of maternal behavior.
And a
scored.
big
So
sample, more
Mhm.
samples too, right? Like you
Yeah,
would have
more
a lot more
samples.
data. And
Yeah.
are you able to apply, like obviously this was a paper as well. Are you able to basically use your this Amber on like any future projects too? Like that's
Yep.
awesome. I mean that basically probably works down your I don't know, by like a factor of what, three, or like you said, people have to come in to monitor this way. If as long as I guess you do a check to make sure it's doing it correctly, in theory, you
Mhm.
could do this like for a lot of different projects at the same time, as long as everything else is consistent.
Yeah, it took a long time to develop the pipeline, and that's what kept me going, is that once I have it working, it's gonna
It's
pay
being
off.
something like automated that like,
Yep,
and
yep.
then the other thing is, did you, I don't know, stupid question, but can you patent this?
No, so
Since it's technically research.
it's technically research. So actually the pipeline uses it uses two open source tools that I did not develop.
Okay.
Um, so
And
so I've
is that
developed
like the
a couple.
mapping, like the camera mapping is probably one of them, right?
Yeah, so there's the pose estimation, which is assigning the like points of the body parts in the first step, and then the second step is it's kind of a wrapper where it makes it easy to import your
Mhm.
behavior data and then run the algorithms that find the behavior from those coordinate data.
Yeah, because I guess if you were to sell it, you would have to pay a portion to the two that you borrowed from. It's like Linux. If you're familiar with that platform, if anyone ever
Mhm.
sells Linux, they have to give a portion to uh,
Yeah.
the people who originally did it.
I'm trying to be a supporter of open science as well. So
No, that's
I
good.
want people to be able to use it and
And
for their own research.
that goes to my next question. How many people, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, how many people have used that paper for their own mouse or rat studies already? Because I know you finished this last year. Is that right? Or
The paper came
beginning?
out, yeah. The paper came out in September, so it's still relatively new. I'm working with, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 other labs to help them incorporate it into their
Isn't
research
that
now.
awesome?
Yeah, it's really
Isn't
fun. I
is
really
that
enjoy it.
is that like so I was gonna ask this earlier. What has been your best moment of being a researcher in your career so far?
Hmm. Oh, it's hard to pick one. I defending my dissertation, I was very proud and it felt good to have accomplished
What'd
everything.
you do after that? after you defended it?
After I defended it, I went and I did a trip across Utah to all the national parks for
Hey,
like
it's not
3 days.
bad. Did you go to
Yeah.
Angel's Landing?
I I didn't go all the way up,
You're afraid of
but
heights, or were you
yeah,
afraid of that sign that said 13
it
people
was,
had died?
yeah, and it was very crowded the day we were there, and
I totally
yeah,
get it. I didn't go all the way up either, so I'm not judging you. But yeah, that is a great trip, though.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, and then I moved to Texas.
You're not too far. I forget. Austin is like, I don't. It doesn't matter. I don't remember.
It's right in the middle.
Okay, so you have to drive basically 8 hours to go north out of it, right? Yeah. Um, what was the other thing you said? Another big
Oh,
moment.
and then, so actually people post on like science Twitter when they're presenting a poster at a conference. And so I did that last year for a conference I was at, and then my tweet got a lot more attention. This is the first time I like ever was going to talk about or present Amber, and my tweet kind of went, I wouldn't say viral, but maybe viral by science standards.
Hmm.
And so I that kind of like, I got a lot of positive attention. People were excited about it. It motivated me to finish the project and open up some opportunities. So that
No,
was
that's awesome. Well, I was totally thrown by like you've got 5 different universities contacting you, and do like any companies contact you for that stuff as well? Like, I mean, there's probably a lot of companies working with rats and mice, especially for pharmaceutical studies and studies I don't even know. But like, what about companies and other platforms besides universities?
some. I was invited to this machine learning workshop for home cage monitoring.
Oh,
It's actually
okay.
by a European group
Okay.
in September, and they had a lot of people from both industry and academia there. So it was a fun kind of group to talk to, a lot of software engineers and other people trying to make home cage monitoring.
So this is similar to this flavor, but I was looking at a video, I don't know if it was last week, and it was on the negative end of monitoring. And well, I wouldn't say negative, but more monetarily driven. It was a coffee shop, and it showed each individual that was sitting down drinking a coffee, but it was showing how long they had been there. And then it had also had, and when I say it had like the timers above each one of these people, and then it had the servers for the people, and it showed how many coffees they had served. So it was kind of like tracking their productivity, and it was like
Uh-huh.
monitoring loiters in the coffee house. And I was like, man, it. And
Yeah.
the funny thing is, it was just like retro, like cameras. It was like cameras you would see in like 1995, but they had like, and it's just funny how like monitoring has gone to that level where
Yeah. The
we don't.
technology's there.
Yeah, because I mean, like, if you assume you're doing this with mice and rats right now, you can imagine that like DHS, CIA, like all these like governmental companies are monitoring people through, like public cameras, maybe not public cameras that are kind of doing the same thing for suspicious activities, large packages that are in like, what everyone hears every 5 minutes in an airport, all unintended baggages. Like
Right.
they're probably looking on the ground for that, looking for like a large mass next to that like suitcase. Um, but yeah, it's crazy to think that and that's why the CAPTCHA keeps on getting more difficult, like over and over, right?
Mhm.
Like sometimes I can't even do it, like pick out all the crosswalks or all the bicycles.
Yeah.
Um, so we talked about what does success look like to a researcher. So right now you're in your educational discovery phase of using rats and mice. Do you ever see yourself like, is the next step moving to like a research company or a biomedical company? Obviously, that might be a next step, but what are the like next steps that are usually taken from a person in your position?
So I have two options: going into industry, going into pharmaceutical, and that could look um like anything, any kind of job you can imagine that is relevant to any of the skills I have, or try to get a faculty position at a university. So those are my options. I'm
Well,
open to either, but I am going to try to get a faculty position and
okay.
see.
And I would assume those are much more, how do I phrase this? Much more competitive, I guess.
Yeah, there's very few of them, and there's a lot of highly qualified people, so it definitely is a bottleneck. And then like it's also a little bit about luck and what's available. So there's not
And
very
who you
many
know.
who you know, and then also who they're looking for. It might be that they have like a group of faculty and they don't have someone who covers like the addiction space or something. So they might be looking for someone in that. And so even if
Yeah.
I want to apply, that's not really what I study. So I wouldn't be a good fit.
And
So it's
then,
just
yeah.
what's available. And the job cycles are like, there's one job cycle a year. So if it doesn't
I
have to
gotcha.
happen, if it's not open that year, you got to wait another year.
Okay. And would you say that like, then tell me if I'm wrong on this, but US Health like organization, this is just an example, gives funding for $25 million for academics to research, I don't know, like patting your child on the head type research. And the university is looking for a professor who's done stuff like that. Is that kind of how the funding is driven usually? And I'm not saying US Health is driving it, but the money drives.
Yeah, primarily. So when you're expected, if you're getting a research position at a R1 university, you're expected to bring in grant money. And so you do need a research program that is going to bring in grant money. So for us, that usually comes from NIH, sometimes NSF as well. So it helps if your research is
National Science Foundation?
yes,
Okay.
NSF. And yeah, so it helps with if your research is aligned with the goals of NIH.
Okay.
So
Makes sense.
for me, that would mean, contributing to helping figure out underlying causes of mental health disorders or of some kind, generally, or child development.
Mhm. So I guess my big question is, what do you see as, is there anything that's kind of like not your end goal, but that you're trying to reach with your research? Anything or any research study that's kind of like, like everybody's, well, not everybody, but some people have like a big goal that they're eventually slowly trying to take away. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, there's a couple of them, I think. They feel so big. I don't know that if I know that there's a lot of us working on these problems, so I don't know if they're attainable even in the course of my whole career, but trying to figure out how like environmental factors affect long-term health, including the brain, and then also how we can intervene early on. And like, as I mentioned earlier, early life social interactions, particularly between parents and infants, are really powerful regulators. So that's kind of where I focus. If we can figure out how to harness that power to, improve outcomes for people who experience early life chemical exposures or early life stress or other unfortunate events that increase the susceptibility to negative outcomes later in life, then that's kind of my overarching
Because,
goal.
yeah, I saw you had a couple big studies. I think one of the ones that really hit me was that, um, obviously, I think it was maternal, but maternal like stress incidents in the mother can be genetically passed down to the next generation, which was, I mean, it makes sense when you look at like larger scale stuff like people being afraid of like snakes that's never seen snakes before, or babies knowing like facial expressions without even being taught. But like having inherited stress just feels like, I don't know, that you've already lost the game. How, like, and what have you seen with that? Like, which study was that? I was trying to remember.
I'm not sure. Was it a human study, maybe?
maybe it was a human study. I can't remember, but when I read that, I was just like, man, that just seems like. And is that kind of along the lines of what?
A lot, when we think genetics, often when we talk about inherit, or when people hear the word inheritance, they think genes, but there's a lot of things that can get inherited. So you can inherit socioeconomic status or environments, all these different things. And so there's a lot of weight. And then when you're born or, during gestation, the brain is very plastic and open to being affected by these external factors.
Mhm.
So like, yeah, I focused a lot on early childhood stressful experiences or adverse experiences, but also like maternal education is often a measure that is associated with kind of negative health outcomes, and education takes place sometimes well before the infant is born, but it's still associated. And there's another study that's showing that like the socioeconomic status the mom grows up in affects the infant's outcome. So that's probably, I think, embedded in her biology, but also just like kind of a proxy for a bunch of other things going on in the environment.
So
I don't
just
know if
like,
that.
no, it makes sense. It's just like what we said at the beginning. It should never have been nature versus nurture. It should have just been nature nurture. Like they should have
Yeah.
just made it one word, which is like it should be its own word. Is there any?
Yeah. It's like hard to pull them apart, and people have tried for a long time, but there's so much back and forth between them, like on a second by second basis, that you can't really ever disentangle them from each other well.
Yeah, you should definitely read Red Queen. At least read the summary of it, see what you think of
Okay.
it. And I also have it on audiobook if you have like a 25-minute commute or something like that. Um,
But yeah, no, that's interesting. I gotta. And there's another book that I read that I think you'd like too because it's kind of got a sports appeal to it. It's called Range. Have you heard of that one? It's kind of talking about early development of a variety of skills. Like for example, they talk about Robert Federer didn't start playing tennis until later on in his life, but he played like he did gymnastics, he did soccer, he did like all this other different stuff because it gave
Yeah.
them like a better spatial awareness, gave him like better um I guess I don't want to say like feeling of his body and his orientation, what his body could do and stuff like that. But it's other aspects like musician, like uh it's pretty good. Uh Okay, my last question.
Mhm.
What is something that your parents did that you'd like to pass on to a next generation? And what is something that you might want to do differently if you were to have kids?
So something that my parents did for me that I'd like to pass on, my parents um, encouraged me and my siblings to work really hard, and they were good examples of that, but work really hard in particular at things that you feel passionate about or you're excited about. So it's funny that you just said that because my parents put me in a lot of activities when I was young. I did ice skating, I did gymnastics, ballet, piano, dance, and they let me quit the ones that I clearly wasn't enjoying, but also really encouraged me to work hard. And I think like I developed a good work ethic because of them. So yeah, that's something I definitely want to be able to pass on. And I think it's easier to work hard at something that you're excited about. So added bonus. And then something that they did that I might want to change. My parents weren't great at having difficult conversations or like talking about things that were unpleasant or, uncomfortable. And I think it started as kind of they're trying to protect us when we were young, but then, and then I think they just figured at some point we figure out what was going on. But I think that, we learned to, we're not supposed to talk about bad things. And I think as adults, we've had a lot of those conversations, but yeah, I think that's something I might want to
I like
change with
that.
my.
That's a new one. I haven't heard that one yet. That's good. And by the way, just so if my memory's right, your mom
is in a similar field as you, right? She isn't she bio?
No, my she was an elementary school teacher, and then she's done a lot of like curriculum and instruction developments.
Okay, I don't know why I thought that. Okay.
She has a master's in school psychology, so that's
Okay,
kind
maybe
of like,
that's where I saw that. Okay. Well, by the way, thank you very much for doing this. I know after, are you teaching right now too?
no, I don't have to
No.
teach.
Oh, you must be that good of a researcher.
Yeah, it's the perk of being a postdoc. You can just
You can,
focus on research.
but you
I
gotta,
supervise some undergrads, so I do
okay.
some teaching, but no, I don't have to.
Okay. I was gonna say you gotta make sure you got that research money though.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks again for this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. This is fun.
Yeah.
If you like this week's episode of People More Interesting Than Me, please follow me on Apple Podcasts so you won't miss out on more episodes like these.